You're constantly reacting to circumstances, people, and events, feeling controlled by external forces, leaving you powerless, frustrated, and overwhelmed, while certain people demonstrate extraordinary situational control, remaining calm-centered and in command regardless of chaos around them. Recognizing that control is not about manipulating others or forcing outcomes, but about maintaining internal sovereignty, choosing responses deliberately, and influencing situations strategically through systematic frameworks. Knowing that reactive people are controlled by circumstances triggered by others and emotionally hijacked by events, making them predictable, manipulable, and powerless, while proactive controllers shape situations, maintain composure, and determine outcomes through conscious choice. Understanding that shift from reaction to control requires developing emotional regulation, strategic thinking, frame control, and deliberate response patterns that transform you from victim of circumstances to architect of outcomes, and losing years of opportunity, peace, and effectiveness, because reactive patterns keep you trapped in automatic responses, defensive positions, and emotional volatility, making control mastery absolutely essential for personal power and life effectiveness. This reactive trap is systematically undermining your life by keeping you in victim mentality, where external circumstances control your emotional state and responses, preventing effective decision-making because reactive emotional states impair judgment and led to regrettable choices, damaging relationships through defensive reactions, attacks, or emotional outbursts that alienate others, making you predictable and easily manipulated because reactive people follow obvious patterns others exploit, and ensuring decades pass feeling powerless, controlled by life, rather than controlling it, making control development critical priority. Stopping reaction and starting control is not about suppressing emotions or becoming robotic, but about experiencing feelings while maintaining behavioral sovereignty. Not about controlling others through manipulation, but about controlling yourself, your responses, and your influence, and not mysterious gift but learnable system. This audiobook teaches how to stop reacting and start controlling every situation through 10 powerful frameworks, including recognizing reactive triggers and patterns, developing emotional self-regulation, maintaining composure, creating strategic pause between stimulus and response, reframing situations, changing interpretations, establishing frame control, defining reality, developing proactive planning, anticipating scenarios, building outcome focus, directing toward goals, mastering strategic influence, guiding situations, maintaining centered presence under pressure, and integrating all elements into comprehensive situational control, making you uncheckable and commanding. Stop reacting and start controlling every situation. Stop being victim and start being architect. Master 10 frameworks systematically. Practice deliberately and control every situation through unwavering commitment, starting now. Chapter 1. Recognize reactive triggers and patterns. Chapter 1 recognizes reactive triggers and patterns, identifying what specific situations, people, or circumstances provoke automatic emotional responses, enabling awareness and strategic intervention. The awareness requirement shows that recognizing triggers is absolute prerequisite for control, because unconscious automatic reactions continue indefinitely without awareness, making change impossible. The trigger identification enables preparation and strategic response planning, transforming unpredictable reactivity into manageable challenge. That pattern analysis reveals consistent themes in reactive behavior, showing that most people react to the same limited set of triggers repeatedly. That self-awareness of reactive tendencies is first critical step toward self-mastery, because you cannot change what you do not recognize. And understanding that systematically recognizing reactive triggers through trigger mapping, pattern analysis, and early detection is essential first framework for situational control, because awareness creates possibility of intervention where unconsciousness guaranteed continued automatic reaction, making trigger recognition critical foundation for stopping reactivity and starting deliberate control. Recognize reactive triggers and patterns. Map provocations, identify responses. Develop awareness or react unconsciously. The trigger mapping identifies specific situations, people, comments, or circumstances that reliably provoke strong emotional reactions and automatic defensive or aggressive responses. Common triggers include criticism or negative feedback, triggering defensiveness or counterattack. Feeling disrespected or dismissed, triggering anger or withdrawal. Being controlled or constrained, triggering rebellion or resentment. Experiencing injustice or unfairness, triggering moral outrage. Facing uncertainty or ambiguity, triggering anxiety. reminders of past wounds or traumas triggering old emotional patterns, and threats to identity or self-image triggering protective reactions. Map your triggers through reviewing recent situations where you lost composure or reacted strongly, identifying common themes across reactive incidents, recognizing which people consistently provoke reactions, noting what types of comments or situations feel most triggering, and understanding why certain triggers affect you, examining underlying fears, insecurities, or past experiences making situations feel threatening. Explicit trigger awareness transforms vague sense of being provoked into concrete understanding of specific vulnerabilities, enabling targeted intervention. The pattern analysis examines how you typically respond when triggered, revealing automatic defensive strategies and habitual reaction patterns. Common reactive patterns include immediate counterattack or defensive arguing when criticized, withdrawal and shutdown when feeling hurt or overwhelmed, blame shifting or excuse making when confronted with mistakes, emotional outbursts or explosions when frustrated, passive-aggressive behavior when feeling controlled, rumination and mental replay after conflicts, or people-pleasing and over-accommodation to avoid confrontation. Analyze patterns through reviewing how you responded in recent triggering situations, identifying consistent themes in defensive strategies, recognizing whether you fight, flight, freeze, or fawn when threatened, noting which patterns serve you well and which create problems, and understanding that automatic patterns developed as protective strategies often in childhood that may no longer serve adult situations. Pattern awareness reveals that reactive behavior is predictable and therefore controllable once recognized. The emotional signature recognition identifies physical and emotional signals that indicate you are being triggered, enabling early intervention before full reaction occurs. Early warning signs might include physical tension, particularly in jaw, shoulders, or stomach, elevated heart rate or rapid breathing, feeling suddenly hot or flushed, mental narrowing where thinking becomes rigid or black and white, strong urge to speak or act immediately, defensive thoughts or mental justifications arising, or familiar emotional states like anger, anxiety, or shame emerging. Develop awareness of personal signature through noticing physical sensations during triggering moments, identifying thoughts that arise when defensive, recognizing emotional states that precede reactions, and using signature recognition as early warning system, enabling intervention before reaction fully develops. Early detection dramatically increases control because intervening at first signs of trigger is far easier than reversing full emotional hijacking. The situational context awareness recognizes that triggers are more likely to activate under certain conditions, enabling environmental management. Trigger susceptibility increases when physically depleted from poor sleep, hunger, or illness, emotionally stressed from accumulated pressures, cognitively overloaded from excessive demands, socially isolated without support, or dealing with multiple stresses simultaneously. Manage susceptibility through prioritizing sleep and physical health during demanding periods, reducing unnecessary stresses when possible, seeking support when feeling overwhelmed, and recognizing that triggers affect you more strongly when resources are depleted, adjusting expectations and responses accordingly. Context awareness enables realistic self-assessment and environmental modification. The trigger journaling documents triggering incidents and responses, creating data for pattern recognition and progress tracking. Journal entries should include what happened, describing triggering situation objectively, how you felt, noting emotional and physical responses, how you reacted, describing behavior and words, what you wish you had done differently, identifying desired alternative response, and what underlying fear or need was activated, exploring deeper meaning. Regular journaling reveals patterns that sporadic reflection misses while providing evidence of progress as reactive incidents decrease and responses improve over time. The comparative analysis examines how different people respond to same triggers, revealing that triggers are subjective, not objective facts. Situations that trigger you intensely may not affect others at all, demonstrating that reaction comes from interpretation and personal history, not inherent situation quality. Recognizing subjectivity reduces power triggers hold through revealing they reflect your vulnerabilities, not objective threats. The implementation requires mapping specific triggers that provoke automatic reactions, analyzing typical response patterns, revealing habitual defenses, recognizing emotional signature, providing early warning, understanding contextual factors affecting susceptibility, journaling triggering incidents, building pattern awareness, comparing reactions across people, revealing subjectivity. and treating trigger recognition as essential foundation, creating awareness necessary for control where unconscious automatic reactions continued indefinitely, making recognition critical first framework for situational control. Recognize reactive triggers and patterns. Map provocations, identify responses. Develop awareness or react unconsciously. You understand now that awareness is prerequisite for control, that triggers are identifiable and predictable, that patterns reveal automatic strategies, that early detection enables intervention, and that Chapter 1 provides recognition framework making awareness possible where unconsciousness guaranteed continued reactivity. Chapter 2. Develop emotional self-regulation, maintaining composure. Chapter 2 develops emotional self-regulation, maintaining composure and calm-centered presence under all circumstances, preventing reactive emotional hijacking. The regulation power shows that emotional control enables clear, rational thinking, while emotional flooding impairs judgment, creating poor decisions. That composure under pressure signals strength, confidence, and leadership, while visible emotional reactivity broadcasts vulnerability and weakness. That self-regulation prevents regrettable reactions, words, or actions that cannot be taken back once expressed in reactive state. That regulated people control situations while reactive people are controlled by their emotions, making them predictable and easily manipulated. And understanding that systematically developing emotional self-regulation through physiological calming, cognitive reframing, and centered presence is essential second framework for situational control, because composure is foundational requirement for deliberate response and strategic action, making regulation critical capability for stopping automatic emotional reactions and maintaining command regardless of external provocations or internal feelings. Develop emotional self-regulation, maintaining composure. Stay calm-centered always. Regulate emotions or react automatically. The physiological calming techniques manage body stress response, preventing emotional hijacking through direct intervention in physical arousal that underlies emotional intensity. When triggered, body activates fight or flight response, including increased heart rate, rapid shallow breathing, muscle tension, and stress hormone release, creating physiological foundation for emotional reactivity. Counter arousal through controlled breathing using slow, deep diaphragmatic breaths, activating parasympathetic nervous system that calms body. Box breathing technique, inhaling 4 counts, holding 4, exhaling 4, holding 4, repeating until calm. 4-7-8 breathing, inhaling 4, holding 7, exhaling 8, creating longer exhale than inhale, triggering relaxation response. Progressive muscle relaxation, systematically tensing then releasing muscle groups throughout body, reducing physical tension. Grounding techniques, focusing attention on physical sensations like feet on floor or objects you can touch, anchoring in present moment. Cold water exposure like splashing face or holding ice, triggering mammalian dive reflex that slows heart rate. And brief physical movement like walking or stretching, releasing tension and stress hormones. Practice physiological techniques during calm times, making them automatic tools accessible during stress, enabling rapid deployment when triggered, preventing full emotional flooding. The cognitive reframing changes interpretations and meanings assigned to triggering situations, reducing emotional intensity through alternative perspectives. Emotions arise from interpretations, not objective events, meaning same situation creates different emotions depending on how interpreted. Reframe triggers through asking, is there alternative, less threatening way to view this situation? Am I catastrophizing or overgeneralizing, making situation worse than it is? What would more balanced, realistic perspective be? How will this matter in 1 week, 1 month, or 1 year, providing temporal perspective? What might be positive intentions or constraints affecting other person's behavior? And what can I learn or how can I grow from this challenge? Reframing does not deny reality, but finds interpretations that reduce unnecessary emotional suffering while enabling more effective response. Practice reframing by catching automatic negative interpretations and deliberately generating alternatives, building habit of perspective, taking that prevents emotional hijacking. The centered presence maintains connection to calm core self regardless of external chaos or internal emotional weather. Centered presence means staying grounded in deeper identity and values, not swept away by momentary emotions. Maintaining observer perspective, watching emotions arise and pass without complete identification. Remembering larger context and purpose, preventing single incident from feeling all-consuming, and accessing inner stillness or peace that exists beneath surface emotional turbulence. Cultivate centered presence through regular meditation or mindfulness practice, building familiarity with calm center. connecting daily to core values and larger life purpose, providing anchor during difficulties. Practicing detachment from emotions, recognizing feelings as temporary visitors, not permanent identity. And developing ritual or anchor that returns you to center, like deep breath mantra or physical gesture you can use when feeling reactive. Centered presence creates unshakable core that external circumstances cannot disturb. The emotional labeling increases regulation through accurately identifying and naming specific emotions experiencing. Research shows that labeling emotions reduces amygdala activation and increases prefrontal cortex involvement, shifting from reactive emotional brain to rational thinking brain. When experiencing strong emotion, pause and identify precisely what you feel using specific emotion words, like frustrated, disappointed, anxious, embarrassed, or betrayed, rather than vague upset or bad. Precise labeling creates psychological distance from emotion, transforming overwhelming feeling into objective observation, enabling greater control. Expand emotional vocabulary beyond basic categories, enabling more accurate labeling and better regulation. The acceptance practice allows emotions to exist without resistance or suppression, paradoxically reducing intensity and duration. Resistance to emotions amplifies them through creating secondary suffering from fighting feelings, while acceptance allows natural dissipation. When experiencing difficult emotion, practice accepting by acknowledging I feel angry or I am experiencing anxiety without judging emotion as bad or trying to force it away. Allowing emotion to be present without acting on it, creating space between feeling and action, breathing into emotion rather than tensing against it, and trusting that emotions are temporary waves that arise, peak, and pass naturally when allowed. Acceptance does not mean liking emotion, but simply ceasing futile struggle against what already exists. The response delay creates space between emotional trigger and behavioral response, preventing regrettable reactive actions. When feeling strong emotion, commit to pausing before responding through counting to 10 before speaking, excusing yourself briefly from situation to calm down, sleeping on important decisions or communications, telling others you need time to think, preventing pressure to react immediately, and using delay to deploy calming and reframing techniques, bringing rational thinking back online. Delay transforms automatic reaction into conscious response. The self-compassion practice treats yourself kindly during emotional difficulty rather than harsh self-criticism that intensifies distress. When struggling emotionally, speak to yourself as compassionate friend would, offering understanding and encouragement, not judgment and contempt. Self-compassion reduces shame and facilitates healthy emotion processing. The implementation requires managing physiological arousal through breathing and physical calming, reframing interpretations to reduce emotional intensity, maintaining centered presence grounded in core self, labeling emotions precisely, increasing cognitive control, accepting feelings without resistance, allowing natural dissipation, delaying responses, creating space for regulation, practicing self-compassion during difficulty, and treating emotional self-regulation as essential control. Foundation enabling clear thinking and deliberate action, where emotional reactivity created impaired judgment and automatic responses, making regulation critical. Second framework for situational control. Develop emotional self-regulation, maintaining composure. Stay calm, centered always. Regulate emotions or react automatically. You understand now that regulation enables clear thinking and deliberate action, that physiological calming manages arousal, that reframing reduces intensity, that centered presence provides anchor, and that Chapter 2 provides regulation framework, making composure possible where reactivity created emotional hijacking. Chapter 3. Create strategic pause between stimulus and response. Chapter 3 creates strategic pause between stimulus and response, inserting conscious deliberate choice where automatic immediate reaction previously occurred. The pause power shows that space between trigger and response is where freedom and control exist, because immediate reaction bypasses conscious choice following automatic programming, while pause enables evaluation and strategic selection. That Viktor Frankl observed, between stimulus and response, there is space, and in that space is our power to choose our response, determining growth and freedom. That pause prevents regrettable words or actions that cannot be unsaid or undone once released in reactive moment. That pausing signals strength and self-control, while immediate reactivity reveals being controlled by triggers appearing weak and predictable. And understanding that systematically creating strategic pause through response, delay, conscious evaluation, and deliberate choice is essential. Third framework for situational control. because pause transforms automatic stimulus response conditioning into conscious agency and power, making space creation critical practice for stopping reflexive reactions and starting intentional responses. Create strategic pause between stimulus and response. Insert conscious choice. Pause deliberately or react automatically. The response delay technique commits to pausing before responding to any triggering stimulus, preventing automatic reaction from bypassing judgment. Delay might be brief pause of few seconds before speaking, allowing initial emotional surge to pass, longer pause of minutes or hours stepping away from situation to gain perspective, or extended pause of days for important decisions or communications, ensuring thorough consideration. Implement delay through establishing personal rule never to respond immediately to triggering communications like provocative emails or messages. Counting to 10 before speaking in heated discussions, giving arousal time to decrease. Excusing yourself briefly from difficult conversations to collect thoughts and calm down. Sleeping on important decisions, preventing emotionally driven choices made in reactive state, and using phrases like, "let me think about that," or "I need some time before." Responding, creating socially acceptable delay without appearing weak or indecisive. Response delay is not avoidance or procrastination, but strategic choice to respond from centered calm state rather than reactive triggered state, ensuring response serves long-term interests, not just discharges immediate emotional pressure. The conscious evaluation during pause assesses situation and options, enabling strategic choice rather than automatic reaction. Evaluation asks, what am I feeling right now? And why, identifying emotional state and trigger. What does this situation actually require versus what my reactive impulse wants to do, distinguishing between effective response and emotional discharge. What are my options for responding, considering multiple possible actions, not just obvious reaction? What would be consequences of each option for myself and others, thinking through likely outcomes? Which response best serves my long-term goals and values, not just immediate emotional satisfaction? And what would my wisest self or respected mentor advise, bringing broader perspective? Conscious evaluation transforms triggering moment from automatic reaction into strategic decision-making opportunity, ensuring response is chosen, not reflexive. The deliberate response selection chooses action intentionally based on evaluation and values, not emotional impulse or defensive reflex. Deliberate selection means choosing response that serves your interests and goals, even when different from emotional urge. Responding in manner aligned with your values and principles, not just reacting to provocation. Selecting response likely to produce desired outcome, not just discharge emotion. And maintaining agency through conscious choice, not being controlled by trigger into predictable reaction. Practice deliberate selection through clearly identifying desired outcome before responding, choosing words and actions that move toward goal, responding from values, not emotions, and accepting that effective response may feel unsatisfying emotionally in moment, but serves better long term. The pause anchoring establishes physical or mental cues that trigger pause habit, making response delay automatic. Anchors might include taking 3 deep breaths before responding, creating physical pause ritual, touching specific object like ring or bracelet as reminder to pause, using specific phrase or mantra that signals pause time, or visualizing stop sign or other symbol, creating mental pause cue. Practice anchor until it becomes automatic trigger for pausing, ensuring pause happens even under pressure when most needed. The worst-case scenario contemplation during pause imagines consequences of reactive response, motivating restraint. When tempted to react impulsively, ask, what is worst that could happen if I say or do this reactive impulse? How would I feel about this response tomorrow or next week when calm? Could this damage important relationship or opportunity? And am I willing to accept worst-case consequences? Worst-case contemplation often reveals that momentary satisfaction of reactive response is not worth potential long-term cost, increasing motivation to pause and choose wisely. The proactive response scripting prepares strategic responses in advance for predictable triggers, eliminating need for on-the-spot decision-making during reactive moment. For known triggers, script effective responses, planning what you will say or do when situation arises. Rehearse scripts mentally or through practice, and deploy a prepared response when triggered rather than improvising in reactive state. Scripting is particularly valuable for recurring triggers like criticism from specific person or common workplace conflicts. The pause practice during low-stakes situations builds habit that becomes available during high-stakes triggering moments. Practice pausing before responding even when not triggered, delay responses to neutral communications, building delay muscle, and treat every interaction as opportunity to practice conscious choice. Habitual pause developed through practice becomes automatic during stress. The implementation requires committing to response delay before reacting to triggers, consciously evaluating situations and options during pause, deliberately selecting responses based on values and goals, establishing physical or mental pause anchors, contemplating worst-case scenarios before reacting, scripting responses for predictable triggers, practicing pause during low-stakes situations, and treating strategic pause as inserting freedom and choice where automatic reaction previously occurred, making pause creation essential. Third framework for situational control, transforming conditioning into conscious agency. Create strategic pause between stimulus and response. Insert conscious choice. Pause deliberately or react automatically. You understand now that pause creates space for choice and control. That delay prevents regrettable reactions. That evaluation enables strategic selection. That practice builds pause habit. And that Chapter 3 provides pause framework, making conscious choice possible where immediate reaction bypass judgment. Chapter 4. Reframe situations, changing interpretations and meaning. Chapter 4 reframes situations, changing interpretations and assigned meanings, transforming emotional responses, and enabling control through perspective shifts. The reframing power shows that interpretations create emotions, not objective events, because same situation interpreted differently produces completely different emotional responses. That changing how you frame situation changes your experience of it, without changing external circumstances, creating psychological control when physical control is impossible. That reframing is not denial or self-deception, but recognition that multiple valid interpretations exist for most situations, making perspective choice available. That automatic negative frames amplify suffering, while strategic empowering frames reduce distress and enable effective action. And understanding that systematically reframing situations through generating alternative perspectives, choosing empowering meanings, and challenging automatic interpretations is essential. Fourth framework for situational control, because interpretation choice creates emotional control, making reframing critical skill for transforming reactive suffering into chosen responses. Reframe situations, changing interpretations and meaning, choosing powering perspectives. Reframe deliberately or accept automatic frames. The alternative perspective generation creates multiple valid interpretations of triggering situations rather than accepting single automatic frame. When situation triggers negative reaction, pause and generate alternatives through asking, what are 3 different ways I could interpret this situation? How would optimistic person view this versus pessimistic person? What might be positive intentions or constraints affecting other person? How might this situation look from other person's perspective? What opportunities or lessons might exist within this challenge? And if I viewed this as happening for me, not to me, how would that change? Interpretation. Generate minimum 3 alternative perspectives, even if you do not fully believe them, because process of generating alternatives loosens grip of automatic negative interpretation and reveals that situation is more ambiguous than reactive mind suggests. Alternative generation does not require rejecting original interpretation, but simply recognizing it as one possible view, not definitive truth. The empowering meaning assignment chooses interpretations that reduce suffering and enable effective action over disempowering frames that amplify distress and create helplessness. When facing difficulty, ask, what meaning would empower me versus disempower me? How can I frame this as growth, opportunity, challenge, or lesson versus pure suffering or injustice? What interpretation enables productive action versus paralysis or victimhood? And which perspective serves my well-being and goals versus feeding negativity? Choose empowering frames like, this is difficult, but I can handle it. This setback is temporary, and I will learn from it. This person's behavior reflects their issues, not my inadequacy. Or this challenge is developing my strength and resilience. Empowering frames do not deny difficulty, but frame it in ways that preserve agency, hope, and capability, while disempowering frames like, this is terrible, and I cannot handle it. This proves I am inadequate, or things never work out for me, create suffering and helplessness beyond what situation requires. The cognitive distortion identification recognizes and challenges thinking errors that create unnecessarily negative interpretations. Common distortions include catastrophizing, viewing situation as worst possible disaster when really minor setback, Overgeneralizing, seeing single incident as proof of universal pattern, like thinking I always fail based on one mistake. Black and white thinking, viewing situations in extreme all or nothing terms without recognizing middle ground. Mind reading, assuming you know what others think or intend without evidence. Fortune telling, predicting negative future outcomes as certainties. And personalization, taking excessive responsibility for things outside your control or attributing others' behavior to yourself when unrelated. Challenge distortions through asking what evidence supports this interpretation versus what contradicts it. Am I thinking in extremes when reality is more nuanced? Am I making assumptions about unknowables like others' thoughts? Am I predicting future as if certain when really uncertain? And am I taking inappropriate responsibility or blame? Distortion recognition prevents automatic negative interpretations from going unchallenged. The temporal reframing applies different time perspectives, changing emotional intensity. Ask how will I feel about this in 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, revealing that many things feeling catastrophic in moment appear minor with temporal distance. Temporal reframing also asked how would I advise friend facing this situation, often producing wiser, more compassionate perspective than harsh self-judgment applies to own situations. The positive reinterpretation finds beneficial aspects within difficulty without denying challenge. Even genuinely difficult situations often contain opportunities, lessons, silver linings, or unexpected benefits that can be recognized. Ask what might I learn from this? How might this difficulty make me stronger or wiser? What opportunities might arise from this change or setback? Or how might this apparent obstacle actually redirect me toward better path? Positive reinterpretation is not forced cheerfulness, but realistic recognition that difficulties often produce growth, connections, or opportunities that would not otherwise exist. The comparison frame adjusts reference points, changing evaluation. Situation feeling terrible compared to ideal outcome might feel acceptable compared to worse realistic alternative. Ask compared to what am I evaluating this situation, and would different comparison change my feeling? Gratitude practice is form of comparison reframing, focusing on what you have versus what you lack, changing emotional tone. The control distinction separates controllable aspects where action is possible from uncontrollable aspects where acceptance is required. Frame situations through identifying what I can control or influence in this situation versus what is outside my control, directing energy toward controllable factors while accepting uncontrollable realities. Control distinction prevents wasting energy on unchangeable factors while maximizing agency over controllable elements. The story editing revises narrative you tell yourself about situation, events, or identity. Narratives shape experience, so editing story changes experience. Ask what story am I telling myself about this situation? Is this story serving me or creating suffering? And what alternative story would be more empowering while still truthful? Edit from victim narrative, where things happen to you, toward agent narrative, where you navigate challenges actively. The implementation requires generating alternative perspectives for automatic negative interpretations, choosing empowering meanings that enable action and preserve well-being, identifying and challenging cognitive distortions creating exaggerated negativity, applying temporal reframing for perspective, finding positive elements within difficulty, adjusting comparison frames, distinguishing controllable from uncontrollable factors, editing narratives toward empowerment, and treating reframing as interpretation choice, creating emotional control where automatic negative frames amplified suffering, making perspective shifts, essential fourth framework for situational control. Reframe situations, changing interpretations and meaning, choose empowering perspectives, reframe deliberately or accept automatic frames. You understand now that interpretations create emotions, not events, that multiple valid perspectives exist, that empowering frames enable action, that cognitive distortions exaggerate negativity, and that Chapter 4 provides reframing framework, making perspective choice possible where automatic frames controlled experience. Chapter 5. Establish frame control, defining reality and context. Chapter 5 establishes frame control, defining how situations, relationships, and interactions are understood and interpreted, maintaining narrative authority. The frame power shows that frames are interpretive lenses or contexts that shape how situations are understood, making frame itself more powerful than specific content, because same facts appear completely different under different frames. That controlling frame controls situation because whoever's frame is accepted determines what situation means and how it should be handled. That frame battles are constant, invisible negotiations where competing interpretations vie for acceptance with accepted. Frame determining outcomes that most people unconsciously accept others' frames, never recognizing they could define reality differently, giving away enormous power. And understanding that establishing frame control through a reality definition, narrative authority, and frame defense is essential fifth framework for situational control, because frames shape reality, making frame mastery critical for maintaining command of situations and preventing manipulation through others' frame impositions. Establish frame control, defining reality and context. Maintain narrative authority. Control frames or accept others' definitions. The reality definition establishes interpretation or context for situation, relationship, or interaction that serves your interests and values. Frames might define relationship as collaborative partnership versus competitive rivalry, changing appropriate behaviors. Conflict as productive disagreement versus personal attack, changing emotional response. Criticism as helpful feedback versus hostile judgment, changing receptivity. Or request as reasonable ask versus unreasonable demand, changing compliance. Define reality through asserting clear interpretation early before alternative frames establish, using language that embeds your frame like productive discussion or constructive feedback, rather than accepting loaded framing from others. Telling story or providing context that supports your frame, giving rationale for interpretation. And maintaining frame consistently through returning to your definition when others attempt reframes. Proactive frame definition prevents having to fight against established opposing frames, making early framing strategically important. The narrative authority maintains your interpretation as definitive version, preventing others from imposing alternative frames that serve them. Authority comes from confidence, certainty, and consistency in maintaining frame plus social proof or credentials that lend credibility. Maintain authority through speaking with certainty and conviction, not tentative hedging that invites frame challenges. Repeating frame consistently, not wavering between interpretations. Refusing to engage seriously with opposing frames, treating them as obviously incorrect. And leveraging expertise, credentials, or social status when relevant. Authoritative framing makes challenging frame feel socially awkward or obviously wrong, while tentative framing invites challenges and reframes. The frame defense protects your interpretation against reframing attempts that would shift control to others. Defense techniques include ignoring reframe attempts, completely treating them as not worthy of response, agreeing and amplifying where you accept reframe, then exaggerate it to absurdity, making it ridiculous. Reframing the reframe where you accept surface level, but provide new deeper frame that restores control. Or changing subject entirely when reframe gains traction, preventing consolidation. Recognize reframe attempts through noticing when someone reinterprets situation in a way that serves them or undermines you, uses loaded language embedding their preferred frame, or tells story that establishes favorable context. Defend frame immediately before reframe becomes accepted reality. The metaframe establishes frame about frames, defining rules of engagement or how disagreements will be handled. Metaframes might define interaction as rational discussion requiring logic and evidence, preventing emotional arguments. Collaborative problem solving where both parties work together, preventing adversarial framing. Or bounded disagreement where certain topics or approaches are off limits. Establish metaframe through explicitly stating how you will engage, like I am happy to discuss this rationally, but will not engage with personal attacks, creating framework that favors your strengths. The presupposition embedding builds assumptions into language that establish frame without explicit assertion, making frame harder to challenge. Presuppositions are assumptions necessarily true for statement to make sense. Instead of asserting we should be collaborative, which can be challenged, ask how can we make our collaboration more effective, presupposing collaboration already exists. Embedded presuppositions like when you implement my recommendation presuppose acceptance without explicitly requesting it, making resistance require explicit rejection rather than simple non-acceptance. The contrast frame defines situation relative to worse alternative, making your position appear reasonable or generous. Frame proposal a significant concessional compromise compared to more extreme position you could have taken, making objection appear unreasonable. Establish high anchor, then frame actual ask as moderate compared to anchor. The moral frame defines situation in ethical terms, making opposition appear morally wrong. Frame your position as fair, just, or ethical, while framing opposition as unfair, unjust, or unethical, creating moral pressure. Moral frames are particularly powerful because directly opposing morally framed position requires either accepting moral condemnation or reframing into different moral frame. The inevitability frame presents outcome as certain or situation as settled, reducing resistance through creating perception that opposition is futile. Frame decisions as already made or outcomes as foregone conclusions, focusing discussion on implementation. Not whether, but how, creating momentum that makes reversal difficult. The humor reframe uses levity to diffuse tension or dismiss challenges, making serious opposition appear humorless or uptight. Strategic humor reframes intense situation as less serious, undermining emotional weight while maintaining control. The implementation requires defining situations through strategic framing that serves interests, maintaining narrative authority through confidence and consistency, defending frames against reframing attempts, establishing metaframes about engagement rules, embedding presuppositions that establish frames subtly, using contrast frames making positions appear reasonable, applying moral frames creating ethical pressure, presenting inevitability reducing resistance, deploying humor strategically, and treating frame control as reality definition, determining how situations are understood where accepting others' frames. The rendered control making frame mastery essential fifth framework for situational control. Establish frame control defining reality and context. Maintain narrative authority. Control frames or accept others' definitions. You understand now that frames shape reality and determine outcomes, that early framing prevents defensive battles, that authority maintains frames, that defense protects against reframes, and that Chapter 5 provides frame control framework, making reality definition possible where accepting others' frames surrendered power. Chapter 6. Develop proactive planning anticipating scenarios. Chapter 6 develops proactive planning anticipating scenarios and preparing responses in advance, preventing reactive scrambling when situations arise. The planning power shows that preparation enables control because anticipated scenarios can be handled calmly with planned responses, while unanticipated situations trigger reactive panic and poor decisions. That scenario planning identifies likely challenges and opportunities before they occur, creating readiness advantage over those caught unprepared. That contingency development for potential problems prevents crisis mentality, transforming threats into manageable situations with prepared solutions. That most people operate purely reactively, addressing only what has already happened, never anticipating what might happen, ensuring constant scrambling and stress. And understanding that systematically developing proactive planning through scenario anticipation, response preparation, and contingency development is essential sixth framework for situational control, because preparation transforms unpredictable chaos into managed situations where you have prepared responses, making proactive planning critical practice for preventing reactive crisis mode and maintaining strategic command. Develop proactive planning anticipating scenarios. Prepare responses in advance. Plan proactively or scramble reactively. The scenario anticipation identifies likely future situations, challenges, or opportunities before they occur, enabling preparation. Anticipate scenarios through analyzing patterns in recurring situations like monthly meetings, difficult conversations, or project deadlines. Considering what could go wrong with current plans or projects, identifying vulnerabilities, imagining best case and worst case outcomes for important situations, preparing for range of possibilities, monitoring early warning signs, adjusting scenarios becoming likely, and regularly asking what situations am I likely to face in coming week, month, or year. Effective scenario anticipation is not paranoid worry about every possible disaster, but realistic identification of probable situations worthy of preparation. Focus on high probability or high impact scenarios where preparation would provide significant advantage. The response preparation develops specific planned responses for anticipated scenarios, eliminating need for on-the-spot improvisation under pressure. For each likely scenario, prepare by deciding how you want to respond if this occurs, scripting key phrases or talking points for difficult conversations, identifying resources or information you would need, having them ready, determining who you would involve or consult, and mentally rehearsing response until it feels natural and accessible. Response preparation is particularly valuable for predictable difficult situations like giving performance feedback, having budget discussions, declining requests, or addressing conflicts. Prepared responses executed calmly and competently create perception of unflappable control, while reactive scrambling appears weak and unprepared. The contingency development creates backup plans for potential problems, ensuring you have alternatives if primary plans fail or situations change. Contingency planning asks what could prevent success of current plan. What would I do if primary approach fails or becomes impossible? What alternative paths exist toward goal if main route blocked? What resources or options do I have in reserve? And what early warning signs would indicate need to activate contingency? Effective contingencies identify critical assumptions or dependencies in plans, then develop alternatives if those prove false. Contingency development is not pessimism, but prudent preparation, preventing single points of failure from derailing important goals. The if-then planning creates conditional action plans, specifying exactly what you will do if specific triggering situation occurs. If-then plans take form if situation X occurs, then I will do action Y, creating clear automatic response that bypasses need for deliberation under pressure. Examples include if meeting runs over scheduled time, then I will table remaining items for follow-up. If colleague criticizes proposal, then I will thank them for feedback and ask for specific suggestions. Or if feeling triggered in conversation, then I will take 3 deep breaths before responding. If then planning research shows that specifying exact response to anticipated trigger dramatically increases likelihood of executing planned behavior, because decision is made in advance during calm rational state, not during reactive moment. The rehearsal practice mentally or physically practices planned responses, making them smooth and automatic when needed. Rehearse through mental visualization, imagining scenarios and executing planned responses, seeing yourself calm and competent. Verbal practice, saying aloud planned phrases or conversations, building fluency. Role-playing scenarios with trusted person, providing feedback and refinement. And writing out planned communications like emails or proposals, reviewing and editing before needed. Rehearsal builds confidence, reduces anxiety about challenging situations, and ensures planned responses are polished and accessible, not theoretically prepared, but practically unavailable under pressure. The PI commitment establishes decisions and responses in advance before being in situations where judgment might be impaired by emotion, pressure, or temptation. PI commitment might include deciding in advance how you will respond to common provocations or requests, establishing rules for yourself that guide decisions like I never make important decisions when angry, or I always sleep on major purchases, or communicating boundaries and expectations proactively before they are tested. PI commitment removes decision-making from triggering moment, preventing reactive choices that contradict values or long-term interests. The regular planning sessions schedule dedicated time for proactive thinking and preparation, preventing reactive mode from consuming all attention. Weekly planning might review upcoming week, identifying likely scenarios and preparing responses. Monthly planning examines larger patterns and longer-term scenarios. And annual planning considers major goals, potential obstacles, and strategic preparation. Regular planning ensures proactive thinking happens consistently, not just during crises. The early intervention catches developing situations while still small and manageable, preventing escalation to crisis requiring reactive response. Monitor early warning signs suggesting scenarios developing. Address small problems immediately before they grow, and intervene proactively when patterns suggest trouble ahead. The implementation requires anticipating likely scenarios through pattern analysis and realistic forecasting, preparing specific responses for anticipated situations, eliminating improvisation, developing contingencies for potential problems, ensuring backup plans, creating if-then plans, specifying conditional responses, rehearsing planned responses, building automaticity, PI committing to decisions before triggering situations, scheduling regular planning sessions, catching situations early through monitoring, and treating proactive planning as transforming unpredictable chaos into managed situations where you enter prepared with planned responses, making planning essential. 6. Framework for situational control, preventing reactive scrambling. Develop proactive planning, anticipating scenarios. Prepare responses in advance. Plan proactively or scramble reactively. You understand now that preparation enables calm control while lack of planning creates reactive panic, that scenario anticipation identifies likely situations, that response preparation eliminates improvisation, that contingencies prevent single points of failure, and that Chapter 6 provides planning framework, making proactive preparation possible where reactive scrambling created chaos. Chapter 7. Build outcome-focused directing toward goals. Chapter 7 builds outcome-focused directing attention and action toward desired goals rather than reacting to immediate provocations, distractions, or emotions. The outcome power shows that focus on desired results keeps actions aligned with long-term interests, preventing short-term reactive decisions that contradict goals. that goal orientation provides direction and purpose, preventing aimless reactivity to whatever demands attention most loudly. That outcome focus enables strategic patience, tolerating short-term discomfort or provocation in service of larger objectives. That reactive people are distracted by every stimulus, responding to immediate feelings or external demands, losing sight of what they are trying to achieve, and understanding that building outcome focus through goal clarity, action alignment, and distraction resistance is essential. Seventh, framework for situational control. Because clear orientation toward desired results prevents reactive detours and emotional hijacking, making outcome focus critical discipline for maintaining strategic direction despite provocations and maintaining command of situations by remembering and pursuing what actually matters. Build outcome focus, directing toward goals. Maintain objective orientation. Focus on outcomes or react to provocations. The goal clarity defines specific desired outcomes for situations, relationships, and interactions, providing explicit targets that guide decisions and actions. Without clear goals, reactive people respond based on feelings, impulses, or whatever seems urgent in moment, often contradicting their actual interests. Define goals through asking, what do I want to achieve in this situation or relationship? What would successful outcome look like specifically and measurably? What are my priorities if forced to choose between competing objectives? And what would I need to see happen to consider this a win? Goals should be specific enough to guide action, not vague aspirations impossible to operationalize. For difficult conversation, goal might be reach mutual understanding and preserve relationship, not win argument, or prove I am right, which would guide very different approach. For conflict, goal might be resolve underlying issue, not punish other person or prove fault. Clear goals provide compass that keeps response aligned with interests despite emotional provocations pulling toward reactive detours. The action alignment ensures behaviors and choices serve goals, not just discharge emotions or respond to provocations. Before acting, ask, does this action move me toward my goal or away from it? Am I responding based on what I am trying to achieve or just reacting to feelings or provocations? And if I do this, will I be closer to desired outcome or further? Action alignment prevents common pattern where reactive response feels satisfying emotionally in moment, like telling someone off or walking out, but undermines actual goal like maintaining relationship or achieving cooperation. When feeling pulled toward reactive response that contradicts goals, use goal reminder, asking, what am I trying to achieve here, bringing focus back to outcome, enabling strategic choice over emotional impulse. The distraction resistance maintains focus on goals despite provocations, attempts to derail, or emotional triggers trying to pull attention away from objectives. Distractions might include provocative statements designed to trigger defensive reaction, tangential issues raised to avoid addressing real problem, emotional bait attempting to create argument or conflict, or attempts to reframe situation in ways serving others' interests, not yours. Resist distraction through recognizing when conversation or interaction is veering away from goal, redirecting back to objective through phrases like, let's return to the real issue, or that is separate question, but what we need to address is, refusing to engage with provocations or tangents, acknowledging but not pursuing them, and maintaining persistent focus on desired outcome despite attempts to derail. Distraction resistance requires discipline to ignore emotional bait and peripheral issues, maintaining laser focus on what actually matters. The strategic patience tolerates short-term discomfort, provocation, or delayed gratification in service of long-term goals. Outcome focus often requires not reacting to immediate provocations because reactive response would undermine larger objective. Strategic patience means tolerating being criticized without defensive reaction, because goal requires maintaining relationship, accepting short-term unfairness or frustration, because goal requires cooperation, not conflict, or delaying satisfying emotional response because timing is not strategic. Practice patience through remembering larger goal when tempted to react, recognizing that reactive satisfaction is temporary while goal achievement is lasting, and framing restraint as strength and strategic choice, not weakness or submission. The decision filter evaluates choices through lens of whether they advance goals, providing clear criterion for decisions. When facing choice, ask, which option best serves my goals? What decision moves me closer to desired outcome? And does this align with what I am trying to achieve? Decision filter prevents emotionally driven choices that feel good momentarily, but contradict objectives, creating regret when emotional state passes. The progress tracking monitors movement toward goals, maintaining motivation and enabling course correction. Track whether actions are producing desired results. Measure progress toward objectives. Celebrate incremental wins, maintaining momentum, and adjust approach when not progressing toward goals. Tracking prevents continuing ineffective approaches and ensures goals remain active guides, not forgotten aspirations. The priority discipline focuses energy on highest value goals, preventing diffusion across too many objectives. Limited time and energy require choosing what matters most. Prioritize through identifying most important goals, allocating time and effort accordingly, saying no to activities that do not serve priorities, and accepting that lower priorities may not receive attention. Priority discipline ensures focus on what truly matters. The long-term orientation balances immediate and future considerations, preventing short-term reactive decisions that create long-term problems. Ask, how will I feel about this decision tomorrow, next week, next year? Does this serve short-term emotional satisfaction or long-term well-being? And am I sacrificing important future outcomes for immediate gratification? Long-term thinking provides perspective that prevents reactive choices. The implementation requires defining clear, specific goals for situations and relationships, aligning actions with goals, not just emotions, resisting distractions and provocations, maintaining focus, practicing strategic patience, tolerating discomfort for larger objectives, filtering decisions through goal advancement criterion, tracking progress toward outcomes, prioritizing highest value goals, maintaining long-term orientation, and treating outcome focus as directing toward desired results. Preventing reactive detours where lack of clear goals created aimless reactivity to immediate stimuli, making goal orientation essential. 7th framework for situational control. Build outcome focus, directing toward goals. Maintain objective orientation. Focus on outcomes or react to provocations. You understand now that clear goals guide strategic action, that alignment prevents emotional detours, that distraction resistance maintains focus, that strategic patience serves larger objectives, and that Chapter 7 provides outcome framework, making goal direction possible where reactive distraction prevented achievement. Chapter 8. Master strategic influence, guiding situations. Chapter 8 masters strategic influence, guiding situations toward desired outcomes through persuasion, positioning, and tactical action, rather than passively accepting circumstances. The influence power shows that strategic guidance shapes outcomes and situations, creating results that align with your interests and goals. That influence is not manipulation or coercion, but skillful communication and action that makes desired outcomes more likely. That small strategic interventions at critical moments can redirect entire trajectories of situations, like rudder guiding massive ship through tiny adjustments. That reactive people accept situations as they find them, while strategic influences actively shape circumstances toward preferred outcomes. And understanding that mastering strategic influence through persuasive communication, strategic positioning, and tactical action is essential. 8th framework for situational control. Because influence enables you to guide situations actively, not just respond to them, making influence mastery critical capability for creating preferred outcomes and commanding situations through shaping, not just reacting to circumstances. Master strategic influence, guiding situations. Shape outcomes deliberately, influence strategically, or accept passively. The persuasive communication uses language, framing, and argumentation to shift others' thinking and gain buy-in for preferred approaches. Persuasion principles include reciprocity, where providing value creates obligation to reciprocate; social proof, where demonstrating others' support creates pressure to conform; authority, where leveraging expertise or credentials increases credibility; consistency, where getting small initial commitment creates pressure for larger alignment; liking, where building rapport increases receptivity; and scarcity, where emphasizing limited availability or exclusivity increases perceived value. Apply persuasion through understanding what motivates specific audience, tailoring arguments to their values and interests, framing proposals in terms of benefits to them, not just you, providing social proof through examples of others who support approach, establishing credibility through demonstrating expertise or citing authorities, building rapport and likability before making asks, getting small yeses, building toward larger agreement, and emphasizing unique value or limited opportunity. Persuasive communication is not deception, but strategic presentation, highlighting genuine benefits and value in ways that resonate with audience. The strategic positioning places yourself advantageously within situations, creating structural advantages that make desired outcomes more likely. Positioning might include controlling information flow, ensuring you are a source of critical information, creating dependency and influence, building relationships with key decision makers or influencers, gaining access and ear, establishing yourself as expert or go-to person in domain, creating authority and trust, controlling agenda or framing for meetings or discussions, shaping what gets addressed and how, or managing timing, choosing when to raise issues or make proposals for maximum receptivity. Strategic positioning is proactive shaping of environment and relationships that creates conditions favoring your success, rather than hoping good ideas will be recognized on merit alone. The tactical action takes calculated steps that move situations toward desired outcomes while appearing natural or inevitable. Tactical actions might include raising issues at strategic moments when receptivity is highest, making small incremental requests that build toward larger goals without triggering resistance, creating situations that naturally lead to desired outcomes, like scheduling meeting that forces decision, using silence strategically, letting others fill void, often with concessions or information, or taking initiative to shape default outcomes through acting first, establishing precedent. Tactical thinking identifies leverage points where small actions create disproportionate results, focusing effort where it produces maximum impact. The alliance building creates coalitions of support for your positions, increasing influence through numbers and diverse backing. Build alliances through identifying who shares your interests or would benefit from your success, offering value or support to potential allies, creating reciprocity. Communicating your positions early, gaining buy-in before opposition organizes, and building relationships proactively, not just when needing support. Alliances multiply influence through creating impression of consensus and providing additional voices advocating for positions. The objection preemption addresses likely concerns or resistance before they are raised, removing barriers to agreement. Anticipate objections through understanding stakeholders' concerns, interests, and likely resistance points. Address objections directly in initial proposal, showing you have considered concerns. Provide solutions or mitigations for likely problems, and frame acknowledgement of concerns as strengthening rather than weakening proposal. Preemption prevents objections from building momentum, while reactive defense after objections are raised appears weak. The small win strategy builds momentum and support through achieving visible quick successes that demonstrate competence and value, rather than proposing massive changes that trigger resistance. Identify small achievable wins that move toward larger goals. Celebrate and publicize successes, building credibility. Use momentum from wins to justify larger initiatives, and create pattern of success that builds confidence. Small wins reduce resistance while building track record. The constraint leveraging uses limitations or obstacles as sources of influence and creativity. Present constraints as requiring certain solutions. Use external limitations as neutral third party, forcing decisions, removing personal responsibility, or frame obstacles as opportunities, distinguishing you through how you handle challenges. Constraints properly leveraged become assets, not just problems. The timing mastery recognizes that when you act is often as important as what you do. Optimal timing might include raising issues when decision makers are most receptive, avoiding times of high stress or distraction, sequencing actions to build on previous steps, or creating urgency through deadlines or expiring opportunities. Strategic timing multiplies effectiveness of same actions. The implementation requires using persuasive communication to shift thinking and gain support, positioning yourself strategically within situations, taking tactical actions that guide outcomes, building alliances that multiply influence, preempting objections before they arise, achieving small wins that build momentum, leveraging constraints as influence tools, mastering timing for maximum impact, and treating strategic influence as actively guiding situations toward desired outcomes where passive acceptance left you reactive to others' agendas, making influence essential. 8th framework for situational control through shaping circumstances. Master strategic influence, guiding situations. Shape outcomes deliberately, influence strategically, or accept passively. You understand now that influence guides situations toward preferred outcomes, that persuasion shifts thinking effectively, that positioning creates structural advantages, that tactical action produces results, and that Chapter 8 provides influence framework, making active shaping possible where passivity accepted circumstances as given. Chapter 9. Maintain centered presence under pressure. Chapter 9 maintains centered presence under pressure, remaining calm, composed, and grounded regardless of external chaos, stress, or provocation. The presence power shows that centeredness under pressure enables clear thinking and effective action, while panic or reactivity impairs judgment and creates poor decisions. That composure signals strength, confidence, and leadership, attracting trust and respect, while visible stress broadcasts vulnerability, inviting exploitation or dismissal. That centered presence provides unshakable foundation that external circumstances cannot disturb, creating stability others can rely on. That pressure and chaos reveal true character, with centered people remaining steady while reactive people crumble, showing who can be trusted in difficult moments. And understanding that maintaining centered presence through grounding practices, pressure, composure, and chaos immunity is essential ninth framework for situational control, because centeredness is ultimate test and demonstration of control, making presence cultivation critical for commanding respect, maintaining effectiveness, and demonstrating unshakable strength under any circumstances. Maintain centered presence under pressure. Stay grounded, calm always. Remain centered or panic reactively. The grounding practice anchors awareness in present moment, physical sensations, and core self, rather than being swept away by mental narratives, emotions, or external chaos. Grounding techniques include focusing attention on physical sensations like feet firmly planted on ground or breath moving in and out, anchoring in immediate physical experience. Using 5 senses to notice present environment, what you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, pulling attention from mental stories into actual moment. Placing hand on heart or belly, feeling physical connection to body. Repeating grounding phrase or mantra like I am here now, or this too shall pass, providing mental anchor. Or deliberately slowing breath and movement, counteracting rushed frantic energy. Practice grounding regularly during calm times, making it accessible during pressure when most needed. Grounding prevents mental spinning or emotional flooding, keeping you anchored in present reality, where you can actually act rather than lost in anxious future or ruminating past. The pressure composure maintains calm, regulated state, specifically when under stress, challenge, or provocation. Composure under pressure requires recognizing early signs of stress activation like tension, rapid breathing, or mental narrowing. Deploying regulation techniques immediately before stress escalates, including controlled breathing, progressive relaxation, or brief pause. Maintaining external calm regardless of internal state through controlled expression and body language. And remembering that pressure is temporary and you have successfully handled difficult moments before. Pressure composure is not absence of stress, but ability to function effectively despite it, maintaining performance when others crack. Practice composure in progressively challenging situations, building confidence that you can remain effective under pressure. The chaos immunity remains unshaken by external disorder, confusion, or crisis, maintaining steady center despite surrounding turbulence. Chaos immunity means accepting that you cannot control external circumstances, only your response to them. Maintaining focus on what you can control rather than fixating on uncontrollable chaos. Trusting your ability to navigate uncertainty and adapt as situations develop. And providing calm, stable presence that others can anchor to during collective crisis. Chaos immunity develops through deliberately exposing yourself to manageable chaos, building tolerance. Maintaining routines and rituals during disruption, providing continuity and normalcy. And cultivating philosophy that expects and accepts uncertainty rather than requiring perfect predictability. The emotional equilibrium maintains balanced emotional state, avoiding extreme highs and lows that create instability. Equilibrium means regulating excitement and positive emotions that can lead to overconfidence or poor judgment just as much as regulating negative emotions. Maintaining even keel rather than riding emotional rollercoaster. And recognizing that extreme emotional states, whether positive or negative, impair judgment and effectiveness. Practice equilibrium through avoiding getting too high during successes or too low during setbacks, maintaining perspective that situations are rarely as good or bad as they initially appear, and treating emotions as information, not commands. The mental quieting reduces excessive thinking, rumination, and mental chatter that create noise, preventing clear perception and decision-making. Quiet mind through regular meditation, building capacity for mental stillness, catching and releasing repetitive, unproductive thoughts rather than engaging them, simplifying decisions and commitments, reducing mental load, and creating regular mental breaks from constant stimulation, allowing mind to rest. Mental quiet is not absence of thought, but ability to think clearly without being overwhelmed by mental noise. The value anchoring connects to core values and purpose, providing stable reference point that pressure cannot shake. When feeling unmoored by stress or chaos, reconnect to values, asking what matters most to me. What do I stand for? And what is my purpose here? Value anchoring provides North Star that guides action even when everything else feels uncertain or chaotic. Regular connection to values during calm times strengthens anchor, making it accessible during storms. The rituals and routines maintain consistent practices that provide continuity, stability, and normalcy, especially during disruption. Rituals might include morning routine that grounds you for day, evening practice that creates closure and transition, regular exercise or meditation maintaining physical and mental health, or consistent bedtime routine ensuring adequate rest. Routines provide islands of predictability and control in sea of chaos, maintaining stability. The perspective maintenance remembers larger context, preventing single situation from feeling all-consuming or catastrophic. Maintain perspective through asking, how will this matter in 1 week, 1 year, or 10 years? Recognizing that most crises that feel enormous in moment are forgotten quickly. Comparing current challenge to genuinely severe hardships, revealing that most difficulties are manageable. And remembering past challenges you successfully navigated, proving capability. Perspective prevents catastrophizing and maintains proportionality. The implementation requires practicing grounding techniques, anchoring in present and physical sensations, maintaining composure specifically under pressure, stress, or provocation, developing chaos immunity, remaining steady despite external disorder, sustaining emotional equilibrium, avoiding extreme states, quieting excessive mental noise and rumination, anchoring in core values, providing stable reference, establishing rituals and routines, maintaining continuity, keeping broader perspective, preventing catastrophizing, and treating centered presence as ultimate demonstration of control, remaining unshakable regardless of circumstances, where pressure and chaos revealed reactive panic, making centeredness essential. Ninth framework for situational control. Maintain centered presence under pressure. Stay grounded, calm always. Remain centered or panic reactively. You understand now that centeredness enables effectiveness under pressure, that grounding anchors in present moment, that composure signals strength, that chaos immunity demonstrates stability, and that Chapter 9 provides presence framework, making unshakable centeredness possible where pressure created reactive panic. Chapter 10. Integrate all elements into comprehensive situational control. Chapter 10 integrates all 9 frameworks into comprehensive situational control, creating unshakable commanding presence, controlling every situation. The integration principle shows that individual frameworks practiced in isolation create partial improvements, while comprehensive integration creates complete situational mastery, transforming reactive victim into confident controller. That situational control requires simultaneous development across multiple dimensions, including awareness, regulation, pause, reframing, frame planning, focus, influence, and presence. That each framework enhances effectiveness of others through synergistic mechanisms, creating multiplication, not mere addition of benefits. That most people develop 1 or 2 elements while neglecting others, creating incomplete control with visible weaknesses that stressful situations exploit. And understanding that integrating all 9 frameworks into systematic daily practice, creating cohesive control architecture, is essential 10th and final framework for situational mastery, because only complete integration creates the comprehensive, unshakable control that enables commanding any situation, making integration critical culmination of development, transforming reactive patterns into chosen responses. Integrate all elements into comprehensive situational control. Combine synergistically. Build complete mastery or remain partially reactive. The control architecture maps how all 9 frameworks combine, creating coherent, integrated situational mastery. Trigger recognition from Framework 1 identifies what provokes reactions, enabling awareness and preparation. Emotional regulation from Framework 2 maintains composure, preventing reactive hijacking. Strategic pause from Framework 3 inserts conscious choice between stimulus and response. Reframing from Framework for changes interpretations, reducing emotional intensity. Frame control from Framework 5 defines reality, maintaining narrative authority. Proactive planning from Framework 6 anticipates scenarios, preparing responses. Outcome focus from Framework 7 directs toward goals, preventing distraction. Strategic influence from Framework 8 guides situations toward desired results. Centered presence from Framework 9 maintains uncheckable calm under any pressure. Each framework supports and enables others, creating integrated system far more powerful than individual techniques, creating genuine comprehensive control. The synergistic multiplication recognizes how frameworks amplify each other's effectiveness. Trigger recognition enables early pause before reaction fully develops. Pause creates space for reframing, changing emotional intensity. Regulation maintains composure, enabling clearer framing. Frame control shapes how situations are understood, influencing others' interpretations. Planning prepares responses that pause enables deploying. Outcome focus prevents provocations from distracting from goals. Influence guides situations, making desired outcomes more likely. Centered presence provides foundation, enabling all other frameworks. Consciously leverage synergies, applying multiple frameworks together, recognizing combinations create effects individual elements cannot achieve alone. The phase development recognizes complete mastery, requires sustained multi-month commitment, making strategic progression essential. Foundation phase months 1 to 3 focuses frameworks 1 through 4, building awareness, regulation, pause, and reframing. Control phase months 4 to 6 adds frameworks 5 through 7, developing frame control, planning, and outcome focus. Mastery phase months 7 to 9 integrates frameworks 8 through 9, adding influence and centered presence. Complete integration phase months 10 to 12 combines all elements into cohesive automatic system. Systematic development typically requires 1 year of sustained deliberate practice, creating genuinely comprehensive situational control that becomes natural automatic way of being. The balanced attention maintains development across all framework areas rather than obsessively perfecting single dimension while neglecting others. True situational control requires adequacy across all dimensions, not perfection in one area. Establish regular practice in all framework areas through daily trigger journaling, building awareness. Regular regulation practice, maintaining composure skills. Deliberate pause before responses, building habit. Active reframing practice, developing perspective, flexibility. Conscious frame assertion, maintaining narrative control. Weekly planning sessions, anticipating scenarios. Goal review, ensuring outcome focus. Influence practice in daily interactions. And grounding practice, building centered presence. Track development across dimensions, identifying lacking elements, requiring focused attention, ensuring comprehensive, balanced growth. The situational application adapts framework emphasis based on specific challenges while maintaining all elements. High-pressure situations might emphasize regulation and centered presence. Conflicts might emphasize frame control and influence. Triggering interactions might emphasize pause and reframing. Planning-intensive situations might emphasize scenario anticipation and contingencies. Adapt emphasis strategically while maintaining baseline practice across all frameworks, ensuring comprehensive capability. The habit formation transforms conscious practice into automatic patterns, making situational control natural way of being, not effortful performance. Build habits through consistent daily practice across all frameworks, starting with most accessible elements and progressively adding complexity. Celebrating improvements and progress, maintaining practice even when difficult, and accepting that genuine integration requires sustained time and effort. Habits transform situational control from deliberate techniques into authentic automatic responses. The self-assessment regularly evaluates control across frameworks, identifying strengths and weaknesses. Assess through asking, how well do I recognize my triggers? How effectively do I regulate emotions under pressure? How consistently do I pause before reacting? How skillfully do I reframe situations? How well do I control frames? How thoroughly do I plan proactively? How focused am I on outcomes versus distractions? How effectively do I influence situations? And how centered do I remain under pressure? Compare against goals and identify specific gaps requiring attention. The lifelong practice recognizes situational control development continues throughout life as ongoing refinement. Each level of mastery reveals next level of possible development. Commit to perpetual practice, maintaining all frameworks indefinitely, treating control as permanent lifestyle, not temporary project. The implementation requires designing comprehensive control architecture, integrating all 9 frameworks synergistically, recognizing and leveraging multiplying synergies between elements, developing progressively through phased year-long approach, maintaining balanced attention across all dimensions, adapting framework emphasis situationally, building automatic habits through sustained practice, assessing control regularly across frameworks, committing to lifelong development and refinement. and treating comprehensive integration as creating complete situational mastery, transforming reactive victim into commanding controller, where partial framework adoption created incomplete control with vulnerabilities, making complete integration essential. 10th framework for stopping reaction and starting control of every situation. You have learned 10 frameworks for stopping reaction and controlling every situation. Framework 1, recognizing reactive triggers and patterns. Framework 2, developing emotional self-regulation, maintaining composure. Framework 3, creating strategic pause between stimulus and response. Framework 4, reframing situations, changing interpretations. Framework 5, establishing frame control, defining reality. Framework 6, developing proactive planning, anticipating scenarios. Framework 7, building outcome, focus, directing toward goals. Framework 8, mastering strategic influence, guiding situations. Framework 9, maintaining centered presence under pressure. Framework 10, integrating into comprehensive control. What matters now is applying one framework today. 5 immediate priorities. Identify one specific trigger that provokes reactive responses in you. Practice one physiological calming technique, like controlled breathing during next stressful moment. Create one strategic pause before responding to next provocation you encounter. Reframe one challenging situation by generating 3 alternative interpretations. Establish frame for one important interaction, defining context that serves your interests. Start immediately. Practice consistently. Control every situation. Stop reacting and start controlling every situation, remaining calm, centered, and commanding regardless of external chaos or provocation. Stop being victim of circumstances and start being architect of outcomes through deliberate, conscious response choice. Practice frameworks systematically, integrate comprehensively, and control every situation through unwavering commitment, starting right now today.